So continuing my exploration of East-West fusion, this week I'm going to make 2 rice dishes. The first one I'm going to make is from southern China. It's called bo zai fan, aka clay pot rice, because it's made in a clay pot like this one. And the fusion side of this, again, is going to be Italian, so the rice I'm using here is arborio. May not be the best choice for a clay pot like this, but we shall see. So to get started, I'm going to rinse 2 cups of rice, the cups being the ones included with my rice cooker. I like to rinse it about 3 or 4 times, or until the water is relatively clear. You just want to get off some extra starch so your rice isn't gummy or mushy. Once I've rinsed it, I'm going to throw it into a bowl and cover it up with water. And let it soak for an hour. Once that hour is up, I'm going to grease the inside of my clay pot with a small amount of oil. I'll add in my soaked rice, which I've strained out. Not totally necessary, probably could have used the same water that I soaked it in. But regardless, to that I'll add enough water so that my finger is submerged. Now, a lot of people use the first knuckle on their finger. That usually ends up being a lot more water than I want. Maybe my knuckles are bigger than a lot of people. So I usually use the thickness of my finger instead. I'll turn that on to high, cover it up, and let it go until it comes to a boil. You should hear the lid clacking around on top of the bowl. I'm going to take off the lid and add in some meat. Now in bo zai fan, you'd use lapchung, which is Chinese dried sausage, as well as some cured pork belly. In place of the lapchung, I'm going to use some sopressad, and in place of the pork belly, I'm going to use some pancetta. Now they have totally different flavors from their Chinese equivalents, but we'll see how it turns out. I'll cover that up, reduce the heat to low, and let it simmer for another 10 to 15 minutes, basically until the rice is fully cooked. At that point, I'm going to remove the meat off to the side. And normally in bo zai fan, you'd use some bok choy or gailan, but I'm going to use some broccoli rabe, which is more Italian, or as my mother-in-law likes to say, tofu. I'll slice up the meat into bite-sized pieces. Add it back into the pot. Add a drizzle of oil around the edge. Cover it all up. Turn the heat back up to medium. Then we're going to slowly rotate the pot around so that every side gets a chance to get nice and crispy, because we want that crispy rice along the edge of the pot so you can mix it in and have a little bit of texture. Once I thought the bottom was crispy enough, I took it off the flame. And usually to top the rice, you'd use a sort of sweet soy sauce, but I'm going to use some balsamic glaze, which has similar flavor notes to the normal sauce. I'll drizzle that on in a crosshatch pattern, and it's ready to go. Alright, the second dish I'm going to make is from Korea, and it is a tteolsot bibimbap, or stone bowl mixed rice. So it's going to start out the same. We're just going to rinse our arborio rice. But to make things a little bit easier, Korean recipes seem to favor using the rice cooker instead of cooking it in the stone bowl itself. So I'm going to throw my 2 cups of rice, along with the correct amount of water, into my rice cooker, and let it cook until it's done. At which point, again, I'm going to grease up the clay pot. Now, I know it's called stone bowl mixed rice, but I didn't want to spend a bunch of money and wait a bunch of time to get a stone bowl that I will very rarely use and will take up space in my cabinet. So into that clay pot, I will add the rice. I'm going to cover it up, turn the heat to medium-high, and let it go for a few minutes until you hear the rice starting to crackle and other onomatopoeia that may be copyright protected. And now for the toppings, I'm going to, again, use all Italian ingredients. So whereas normally you top bibimbap with various banchan, here I'm going to be using various antipasto. First one of which is these delicious eggplant pickles. I got the recipe from Pasta Grammar, so I'll link that video in a little card or down below, so be sure to check it out. Pretty easy, great way to use any extra zucchini or eggplant that you have left over from the summer, and it's really good on sandwiches. Next up, I'm going to saute some mushrooms. So I've got some little cremini here that I'm going to slice into 2mm thin slices. I'll dump those into a saute pan over medium-high heat. Add a drizzle of water, as well as a tiny bit of oil. The idea here is mushrooms are really unique. They're kind of like sponges. They're going to suck up as much liquid as they can at first. So what we want to do is basically waterlog them so that they can't absorb any of the oil. I'll season those with salt, as well as some dried oregano, and a little bit of chili flake. Stir that around and let it go until all the water evaporates. You're left with just a little bit of oil and the mushrooms start to brown a little bit. I'll dump those guys on top. Next up, I'm going to saute some onions. So again, thinly sliced. Throw a little bit of oil in a pan. Saute those for about 10 or 15 minutes until they wilt and start to get golden on the edges. Then I'll add those in. Next up, I'm going to saute some zucchini. So I'll smash some garlic. Throw those into the same pan with a little bit of oil. Saute them until they're fragrant. Then I'm going to cut my zucchini into thin little half moons and toss those in. Saute them until they get a little bit of color. And once again, throw them on top of the rice. Now we already got the lacto-fermented pickle to replace the kimchi, but to replace the spice of the kimchi, I've got a couple things going on here. Here's some peperoncino, which, is a vinegar pickle, not too spicy, should bring a little bit of acidity to the mix, but it's also super traditional in antipasto. And I've got some Calabrian chilies that are basically oil-marinated chopped chilies. They kind of remind me of sambal, but minus the fermentation, and they'll fill in the gaps between all the rest of the pickles, basically. Next, I'm going to make a pesto. I've got a bunch of basil that I'll throw into my food processor. I know traditionally you're supposed to use a mortar and pestle, but I'm a modern man, I don't have time for that, and this kind works just fine for me. I'll add in about 30 grams of pinoli, about 3 cloves of peeled garlic, 50 grams of parm, or really as much as you want, because cheese is life. A pinch of salt, about 50 grams of extra virgin olive oil. Use the good stuff. I'll puree that until it's done, adding extra oil if necessary. It's really up to you what texture you want. And then I'll spoon a little bit of that on top. And finally, what is bibimbap without a fried egg on top? So I'll fry an egg. And put it on top. Alright, starting with the bullseye fun. To be honest, this is kind of a mishmash of flavors. The pancetta had like an herbal rub on it that didn't really work with the flavor of the sopressade and that balsamic glaze. I didn't know what was going to happen with the sopressade being steamed, but it works pretty well. It kind of has the flavor and texture of pepperoni that's on top of a pizza. So if I were you, I would just think a little bit more about the different flavors that you're trying to put together in here, not just replacing ingredients with their analogs, but what'll actually taste good together. Now for the bibimbap, if that's what we want to call this, risa mista or something like that, this one came together a little bit better. The main flavors you get are the pesto, the Calabrian chilies, and all the flavors blend together into a really nice garlicky, pickly, and pesto-y kind of mix. Yeah, it works. This is really interesting. I don't know if mixed rice is a thing in Italy, so maybe we want to make this a thing. Again, figure out some ingredients that work well together, preferably things that can be refrigerated and saved for a while, like all these antipasto. That's the idea behind bibimbap, right? It's all your leftover banchan from the week, thrown on top of some rice, mixed together with some sauce. So make it into whatever you want it to be, and enjoy.